I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Emma Laird, who portrays Iris on Mayor of Kingstown. You know what, Emma? Iris is a really complicated character. Let's just put that out there. I just want to know, first of all, because, you really have to go to some really, low lows with her. What did you most love about portraying her, if you can think back?
I know it's hard because I've actually not thought about Iris in like 6 months. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
I mean, what I most loved about it, oh my gosh. What did I love? I think
Nothing. I hated it.
Yeah, I just no, it was I felt like it was a great experience for me because I did so much prep for it. This is my first ever role. And so I spent 3 months prepping, and I was able to really kind of externalize myself from her. So to completely step into someone's shoes and feel empathy for her, and I feel like she has great strength, and it was such a different role to who I am, which I think I really enjoyed playing this vulnerable but yet strong woman.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, no, I know what you mean. Because I really appreciated how you were able to project this external confidence and resilience, but there's this very interesting vulnerability and fragility bubbling underneath her. And I know, just from speaking to hundreds of other performers, that that's actually quite difficult to achieve, because that's our way in for this character. And yet she's still getting around the world, trying to be strong and trying to be beguiling. So is that dynamic actually quite difficult to calibrate from scene to scene?
The dynamic of portraying the vulnerability.
Yeah, I've been quite outwardly confident, especially in the first part, but that she's really broken underneath.
Well, I think she, through her job that you see in episode 2 when she's introduced as a sex worker, that the way that I portrayed the script was all kind of a cover-up of her pretending like she's got this happy, safe life, because we later find out in the series what she went through as a child, which was even more gruesome than what happens to her in the actual series, and that all gets unearthed, and all those emotions come up when she then suffers this second round of trauma. So it worked really well, actually, because the first scenes that I shot were all the strip club scenes, which I really struggled to watch because it was like my first ever day on set doing all these strip club scenes. But it worked well because I was putting on an act as Iris. This was like my cover up, and I'm like, oh, I'm all happy. And that wasn't really who she was. So the fact that we shot all those scenes first actually really worked to my advantage performance-wise, because I'm like, I really struggled to watch it back. So I'm like, oh, I could have done it better. And one of the producers was like, no, but she's got this act on. And then when we get to the point where she breaks down, that's when you see her true self. And then I got to tap into the real dark stuff, which felt so genuine, and I was so locked into that. And it obviously physically those things weren't happening to me, but my mind was in that place, and it felt very real. So I think the sequence of the way we shot it worked out so well performance-wise, I think.
That's fascinating, because that's exactly what she's doing. She's putting on an act, and she's doing it really convincingly, but underneath there's something going on with her, and you really, there's something about the way that you kind of lit up a room, honestly, that made me want to know more. And because we've seen characters like her for decades, but this one was fascinating. I'll give you an example, and then it'll lead to my next question. Early on, Iris walks into Mike's office. It's a sea of blue and brown, and it's really it's not saturated, it's desaturated in terms of the color palette, and she burns the screen in red. Your hair, your clothing, her demeanor, right? That's intentional. That's obviously intentional, but she's super fragile and vulnerable, but yet shows all this bravado, and she tries to match Mike's energy, and doing that is kind of crazy, we know as the audience, because Jeremy Renner is larger than life. So then she says, I'm stronger than you think. And he just rebuffs her and says, no, you're not. So that relationship evolves really significantly throughout the season. And I found those scenes with you and Jeremy just electrifying, really compelling. So that begs the question, how much did you value working with him, with Jeremy Renner? What did you learn from him? And what did you most value about him?
Oh, first of all, it was so important for me to meet Jeremy before I did a scene with him, because this was my first job, and I'd never been working on the same level. Like, I've been in rooms with people before, but never had I been valued. I'd never been on that same kind of level, and so I was really intimidated by his body of work and his talent. I truly think he is one of the most incredible actors ever. And so I really had to make a point of like saying hi to him and getting all that nervousness out before I was stepped onto set with him. Which is really funny, because now like I'm like doing this show with Tom Holland. I'm like, oh, like I don't care. I don't care anymore. I'm used to it. But with Jeremy, because it was my first thing, I was petrified. But that was my first scene that I shot with him, and it was my audition scene. So I was so prepped for it, and I thought I'd be really nervous, but I truly wasn't. We just bounced off one another, and he was throwing in lines that I didn't really expect from him, and I was bouncing right back, and the energy and the chemistry was so amazing. But he was so patient with me. He really was. The cabin stuff where I had to cry into his arms, and he would just hold me and squeeze me and stay on set with me and in the bed in between takes. And I spent a lot of time with him. We were in Toronto. We couldn't leave the country. We couldn't really go out because we were really on lockdown. So I really only spent time with Jeremy. And throughout the course of those 4 or 5 months, he gave me such good advice. And we did like diagrams at his place of things that I want to achieve. And he was really my mentor in a way, whether he knows it or not. I have so much love for him, and I'm so excited that I get to go back and work with him, because I'm in more of his work.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's so incredible. 2 Oscar nominations. I mean, that's not for nothing.
Scary though.
Yeah, like
his role, because it's not like he was method, but he definitely still slipped into it a little bit in between takes, and I'd be on set sometimes. I'm like, oh shit, what have I done? Like, is Jeremy pissed at me? And then at the end of the day, he'd be like, are you all right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just Mike. It's not Jeremy.
Mate, that is so lovely to hear, because I felt like the material that you were playing, that so beautifully written by Taylor Sheridan, is really dark and really heavy. And for a young, relatively new actor, you're still up and coming in your career, that's a lot to take on. So the question for that is, how does playing someone with all that trauma and and the effects of abuse, how does that really affect you? Does it affect you personally at all? And is it difficult to portray that authentically?
Yeah, it was. My friend said to me recently, because when I came back from Toronto to LA in September, and he said a couple of weeks ago, he was like, you were really a shell when you got back. And I didn't realize it at the time, because I was just ready to just take a break. And I thought that I was back to my old happy self. And I definitely became more emotional. It's not like I woke up and thought about Iris, because I knew that it was fiction. And so it wasn't like there wasn't a trauma after set, but it just unlocked something in me that made me a little bit maybe more vulnerable, or just more aware of my emotions, instead of just them passing through and me not really knowing what's going on. I think it's probably a good thing as an actor to now be so aware of and just cry all the time. But it was easy. It was relatively easy to get to that state. I think it's all about prep. If you do your research and understand and really think about and build that backstory and really, go to that place of think, like it sounds awful, but think about what happened to her as a child and really detail that. And I worked with many people and talked about it and really visualize, even just like her bedroom in her house where her dad would abuse her. What did it smell like? What did it look like? What time of day would he get home from work? And really like meticulously think about every single detail so that it feels like a memory that you can then recall when you're talking about it. It's all about prep in terms of to get to any emotional state, I think. And in some ways, I guess it's easier when it's when it's something so traumatic, because it's an obvious thing that you have to research. Whereas if it's, I find that easier anyway than just playing a happy character, or someone with a little bit less depth and trauma, because it's like, well, how do you have to make up so much more stuff when everything was in the script, every detail. And Taylor was there as well he was like, any question that I had, Taylor knew the answer to. He had thought about this script for like 10 years, and it was written 10 years ago. So he really knew this character more than I could ever imagine. He was right back with an answer that I'd be like, oh, you know that, okay.
Yeah, he's incredible. I'm so impressed with his work lately. I mean, everyone is. All of his shows are so popular for good reason. It reminds me the way that you're so deftly able to shift between certain mindsets is, Iris has hit rock bottom. We talk about her abuse from her father. Her mother kicks her out after he committed suicide. Like, you couldn't possibly come up with a worse scenario. Then she's sold from here and there to various groups of white supremacists and so forth as a sex slave, like horrifying. And then she goes to the cabin with Mike. She says that she never believed in God or the devil, but she's seen the devil. She looked him in the eye. And then the phone loses reception and she laughs, and they kind of have that moment of levity. And it's like we needed that. What was that like? Did you find that really, you really wanted that moment, didn't you?
I loved the phone moment with a monologue like that as well. It's a nice way to end the episode. And also in that, I think the beauty in the Mike and Iris thing is that that's really the only time you see Mike, his most vulnerable and truthful self. And I think whether she's aware of it or not, when I watched it, I kind of thought, oh, Mike relates to her in some way and really empathizes with not what she's gone through, but you see his vulnerability, and you see that he's got issues when he's with her and he lets his guard down. And I think it's a really beautiful relationship wherever it goes. I think they've both been a great comfort to each other. But that monologue scene was so hard. I think that was the second scene I shot with Jeremy, and
wow.
It felt like the first time I was speaking on camera, and I was like, oh wait, what's my accent? What am I doing? And Jeremy just had to sit there and listen inside, because he had basically no dialogue. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sorry, Jeremy, I've got to speak for this long. And that was a train wreck for me. So when I got to that last line, I'm like, yay, the end. Done.
That's a lot of pressure. Like, I don't think I'd be able to get through that, to be completely honest.
I know, it's a dark show.
It's a dark show.
It's a very dark show.
Yeah. I love that shift in her persona. I love her fragility, but a lot of the scenes between you and Jeremy, Mike, played by Jeremy, especially towards the end, are also just as much about him, because he's not necessarily the hero. Okay. He does some really bad things. He will literally shoot and kill people at a whim if he's angry enough and he feels like it's necessary. He kind of controls the whole town. A bit corrupt, but he is, I don't even know how to explain it, but Iris brings something out of him for us as the audience. We realize he's actually a really good guy, and he really does care, and he's really deep. So I just wonder, how did you feel about where that relationship and Iris' story finished up at the end of season 1? Because I was expecting the worst, and yet I feel like there's even a glimmer of hope for her.
Yeah, I really like the way that it ended, because, and it's really important for me that I have no idea what happens in season 2. I'm waiting on scripts at the minute, but however it goes, I really want to give her some strength, because she has been through the ringer, and she might go through the ringer again, but like I think there's an internal change happening in her, where she was on the cusp of really killing herself there in that final episode, and she's holding the knife and she thought about it, and I think maybe Mike helped show her that as well, that there's hope. Or I loved the way that it ended, because it's a glimmer of, she can actually have a normal life. And I think that's really important to portray as well, because it's important to portray the traumas that she went through and the trafficking, and it's important to tell those storylines, but it's so important to make sure that we show an audience life after that, and how you can you know, move past that in a way. Who knows what will happen, but I really hope that we can show us that kind of side to it, you know, where her life is not so consumed by everything that's happened to her.
It has to be that way. She has to have some potential for growth. Otherwise, it's just too much for us to bear. Because I mean, that rock bottom with you in the bathtub, that rock bottom with you in the private room in the strip club where you're being beaten to within an inch of your life. I found that very, very hard to watch. I find it hard to watch whenever it's misogyny, overt misogyny. And so if I'm finding that hard, how the hell are you finding it when you're doing that?
I know. It also might be nice to just have her back to an element of what she was when she was first introduced, where she is like the sunshine of the show, because really it's a sad, grim, gray show, and there needs to be light in there, you know.
And that's her.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
her. And then it gets snuffed out for us in the last few episodes, and of course it's necessary, because we need that really to see how far down she can go. But I'm really hoping too that we can get back to her lighting up that screen like you did in episode 2 or whatever it was, because I think that's the stuff that is really unexpected from you, like really, really strong work, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. I mean, I'm really excited just to go back, because like I say, it was my first set and I really didn't understand the dynamic of a set, or, you know, I didn't know what my role was necessarily in terms of as an actor. I didn't know we'd go in to block the scene, and I didn't know that was like an actor's job to like go and decide where you're going to move in the scene. And Jeremy really led all of that. And so I'm excited to go back knowing what it is to be an actor technically on set, and to have already established her and know and have done all that prep to go back and be completely comfortable and really get to explore my performance, I guess, and just do a better job, because there is just me as a self-critic part of me that really can't stand watching half of the show, because that was me figuring it out, you know. And I'm like, and it's not that I can't watch my performance, like I can watch some of those scenes and identify which ones I like, but for the most part I was like, oh, I would have done that so differently. And like that monologues, like there's just a lot of scenes where I'm like, nope.
Can't do it. That's great. And that means I mean, that's how you learn, that's how you grow. And that, even above all else, that's really great for you. Thanks so much for your time today. It's really fascinating. I can't wait for this. Hurry up, everybody, get back to set, because I want to see more. I can't believe I want to see more, because it was so horrifying to sit through, but I really, really enjoyed it. So
I think it's going to be great.